Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Diagnosis Dementia, Now What? My name is Lucy Gerland. I'm a caregiver specialist with the Fairfax Area Agency on Aging. So we welcome you all to today's webinar, and you should have received an email this morning with the speaker's slides, so you'll have them for reference in the future. It is not necessary for you to have these open during the presentation. During the presentation, you can ask a question by typing it into the question box on your panel. We'll be holding most questions to the end of the presentation. And the presentation today is being recorded. The recording will be sent to all registrants by early next week. As you sign out, there will be a brief survey, and please help us by giving us your thoughts on today's webinars and any future webinars. We also have several webinars left in 2019, and we invite you to join us for any of those. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Lindsay Vajpayee. Lindsay is the Director of Education and Outreach at Insight Memory Care Center. Lindsay has dedicated her career to working with older adults who live with dementia and their caregivers. She enjoyed her time as an activity director in long-term care for nearly a decade, and she also served as programs and services manager for the Alzheimer's Association. Lindsay currently holds an activity director certification with specialization in memory care, a master trainer certification with the Best Friends approach to dementia care, and is a certified dementia practitioner. Lindsay is passionate about quality dementia care from professionals. She's also passionate about support and education for care partners and assisting those with dementia to retain a sense of self and purpose throughout every stage of the disease. Lindsay's depth of knowledge and her passion for this topic will be apparent in a moment. And Lindsay, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. And good afternoon, everyone who's on the webinar. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and to educate yourself. I do love what I do. I really find a lot of joy and importance in what this is. So happy to share some of the things that I know and get you connected to more information as well. So in today's webinar, what we're talking about is dementia. Now there's a dementia diagnosis. What do we do next? But I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. I tend to get questions about normal aging versus dementia and terminology during most of my classes, so we'll make sure to briefly cover this in the beginning. So there are normal changes that happen to our brains as we age. You might walk into the kitchen and think, what did I come in here for? But a few seconds, or a couple minutes later, you remember and you're able to complete the task. Or you lose something, but you find it. Or you forget about an appointment, but you remember a little bit later. These are normal things that happen as we age. They may happen more than they used to, but they're not things that are really getting in the way of everyday life, of a person's ability to take care of themselves, live independently, make wise decisions, so on and so forth. But then there are warning signs of some things that are not a normal part of aging. And this is a list from the Alzheimer's Association. One of the very common warning signs of dementia is memory loss, short-term memory loss primarily. So forgetting if I took my medications this morning, what the doctor told me at my appointment yesterday, that my daughter came to visit last week. It's the things that happened most recently that are difficult to remember. And typically, especially early on in the disease, I could remember things that happened decades ago without any problem. Childhood, teenage years, getting into my career, meeting my partner, things like that. And we also notice other kinds of cognitive changes when dementia is present. It's not only memory loss. There are changes in the ability to plan and sequence and solve problems when they arise. There's some difficulty in completing familiar tasks like driving to familiar locations, paying your bills, setting up your doctor's appointments, using the microwave, making coffee in the morning, things like that. There's some confusion with time or place, some trouble with visual images and spatial relationships, which is not a problem with the eyes, it's a problem with the brain understanding the information that the eyes bring in. Sometimes there are challenges with language, with misplacing things and then not being able to retrace your steps and find them. There's typically a decrease in judgment, more poor judgment being displayed. Sometimes a withdrawal from work or social activities, that person pulling back from the things that they used to do, whether it was go to their place of worship every week, or go to that exercise class a few times a week, or have dinner with friends on Saturday night. And there's sometimes a change in mood or personality, more confusion, more irritability, maybe fear, anxiety, a number of things that may be changing in many different parts of the brain. And before we get to the term dementia, we want to mention mild cognitive impairment. For some of you on the webinar, this may be the diagnosis that you have so far heard from a neurologist. Mild cognitive impairment means there is a cognitive change that's more severe than what's considered normal for age, but it's not getting in the way of everyday life. Yes, maybe there's a noticeable memory problem, but it's not really impacting that person's ability to, move through the daily life in a fairly safe manner. I can still drive, to the places I want to go. I can still manage things around the home. I'm still social with my friends. I can keep up with daily life. So having mild cognitive impairment is technically not dementia, but it does increase risk for eventually developing Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia. And here's kind of the longer arc. So we see normal aging at the top. Yes, there are some slight changes, but not very much. Right in the middle of the chart, you see mild cognitive impairment. There are changes that are noticeable, but they're not getting in the way of everyday life. If those changes are kind of part of this longer arc of a form of dementia, eventually more change will take place in the brain, and you will reach the point where we call it dementia, where these changes are now getting in the way of everyday life. And then you see to the left of MCI, you see preclinical. So that means there are changes happening in the brain, but we don't yet see symptoms. No one can tell on the outside, or maybe for the person, there's sort of this subjective, like I just don't feel like my brain is working like it used to. I don't feel like I'm quite how I used to be, but I still pass all the tests with flying colors. So this is kind of that longer arc of what's happening in the brain, eventually mild cognitive impairment, and then eventually dementia. So what is dementia? It's not one specific disease. It's an umbrella term. It's a general word that we use to describe a set of symptoms where there's a cognitive change that's more severe than what's considered normal for age, and now it is also getting in the way of everyday life. It is interfering with daily functioning. And there are a number of different types of dementia. The diagnosis of dementia really means that there's an impairment in at least two different cognitive domains. So it's maybe a memory problem, but then also poor judgment or visual spatial change or change in personality or language or reasoning. There's something happening in at least two parts of our cognitive abilities. And so generally, when we think about dementia, we think about a memory impairment. Not every form of dementia has a memory impairment as one of the early signs. But if there is aphasia, that means there's some inability to use or understand language. Apraxia, inability to coordinate purposeful movement, like to coordinate movement to use your fork to, to stab the food on your plate and get it to your mouth, for example. Agnosia, inability to recognize familiar things or people. Maybe I see that fork, but I don't know what to do with it. And impaired executive function, where your brain is just really struggling to organize information and to sequence and to kind of regulate emotions and things like that too. So I mentioned dementia is an umbrella term. There are a number of different types of dementia. So on the left are irreversible forms, and I will address those in a moment. And on the right are reversible or treatable conditions. They may cause dementia symptoms, but the underlying cause is something that can be treated or reversed. So infection is the first thing you see there on the right. Especially a urinary tract infection for an older adult can really change cognitive ability, but it's also pretty easily treated. Maybe it's depression that looks like dementia, maybe some overlapping warning signs there. And again, depression has ways to help cope and to treat symptoms. Maybe it's a brain tumor, a metabolic disorder, a medication side effect or unintended interaction. Maybe it's a vitamin deficiency, excessive alcohol use, could be a number of different things that are potentially treatable or reversible. So it's really important if someone is experiencing cognitive changes that they go and see their doctor to try to determine the cause. We do not want to make an assumption that just because of someone's age or just because of family history with dementia, that this person is experiencing an irreversible form of dementia. It's really important to see that doctor to figure out the underlying cause. And I would suggest starting with the primary care doctor. And if that person kind of goes through all the diagnostic steps and feels like it's maybe a neurological condition, they will refer on to a neurologist. So now, irreversible forms of dementia. This is probably what you're really here to talk about today. So the most common type of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. You tend to hear those terms used interchangeably. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Dementia, again, is a general term. If someone has dementia, it may be the Alzheimer's type, it may be a different form of dementia. With Alzheimer's, it is irreversible. There is a kind of a progressive change over a long period of time. We tend to think about memory problems being the first warning sign, but eventually there are other changes in the brain as well. Language changes, behavioral changes, loss of activities of daily living, which means loss of ability to care for oneself, to shower independently and clean up in the bathroom and brush your own hair and take your medications and all of those kinds of things. And eventually Alzheimer's disease does end in death. Now, we're often talking about older bodies, and someone may have Alzheimer's but pass away from something else like pneumonia. But if someone does live to the very late part of the disease, they could pass away from Alzheimer's disease. Typically with Alzheimer's, we're talking about people who are age 65 and older, and basically the older someone gets, the more at risk they become. But there are a number of people who are diagnosed before 65, and we call that younger onset, or some people call that early onset. And so I mentioned, the older you get, the more at risk you are. Family history and genetics can play a role, head injuries, and there are a number of other suspected risk factors for Alzheimer's as well. With Alzheimer's, you tend to hear about these plaques and tangles that are forming in the brain, these protein deposits that build up between nerve cells and these twisted fibers within nerve cells. So you can see that in the graphic there on the right side, kind of those dark brown spots between the nerve cells are the amyloid plaques, and then the little brown spot within that yellow nerve cell would be the tau tangle. And so a lot of the research for Alzheimer's disease and trying to come up with some cure or disease-modifying treatment is to try to address these plaques and tangles. But there's been a lot of research looking at other ways to treat this disease as well, maybe looking at everything from inflammation, lifestyle factors, all kinds of different things. Another form of dementia is called Lewy body dementia, and this is its own little kind of dementia umbrella under the larger umbrella. Lewy body dementia can mean dementia with Lewy bodies or Parkinson's disease dementia, and they have some overlapping symptoms and basically happen right next door to each other in the brain. So dementia with Lewy bodies, typically the first warning signs are these changes and kind of deficits in attention and executive functioning. Some other common symptoms include fluctuating cognition. Hallucinations are quite common, typically visual hallucinations, but could be auditory, could be tactile. And there tend to be spontaneous features of Parkinsonism, whether that's a flat affect in the face, balance and gait issues, maybe a tremor, maybe swallowing problems, blood pressure, regulation issues, lots of kind of Parkinsonism features that show up, but with cognitive issues are very prevalent in the beginning of this disease. And then for those with Parkinson's, about 50 to 80% of people with Parkinson's will eventually experience Parkinson's disease dementia, Lewy body dementia. And so with Parkinson's, there are these motor issues first, these physical symptoms, and then it's typically, a number of years later, there are some of the cognitive changes. Vascular dementia is another form of dementia that's typically the result of a stroke or a series of mini strokes, when there have been brain injuries where there's reduced blood flow to part of the brain, and that starts to affect these brain cells. So the symptoms really vary for vascular dementia, depending where the strokes have occurred, how severe they were, how many there have been. And typically vascular dementia progresses more in a stepwise pattern. So someone may kind of plateau for a while until there's another stroke, another vascular incident, and now there's a decline. And then kind of stay right there till there's another vascular incident and another kind of drop in functional ability. And FTD is another kind of family of dementias. So it's a group of brain disorders that include behavior variant FTD, primary progressive aphasia, and a number of others. And when someone is experiencing FTD, those early symptoms tend to be either behavior or language changes, that are most pronounced. FTD tends to affect people at a little bit younger age than something like Alzheimer's disease. Usually the onset is more in the 50s and 60s. But it can be very early. It can be, as early as age 21 and as late as around 80 years old. And so again, those kind of early signs are very different with these forms of FTD than with Lewy body dementia or with Alzheimer's disease or other types. There are many forms of dementia, depending how you slice it, around 100 different types. Some others that you may have heard of: Huntington's disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, normal pressure hydrocephalus, HIV-associated dementia, and CTE. And there are many others as well. And then there's mixed dementia, which means that someone is experiencing at least two types of dementia at the same time. Typically, this is Alzheimer's and vascular dementia affecting the same person, but it could be other combinations. And typically with mixed dementia, we're thinking about people over the age of 80. A lot more research has been coming out to show that it's very common for someone over the age of 80 who's experiencing dementia upon autopsy to see that there's actually at least two, if not 3 or 4 different types of dementia happening to the same person. So how do you diagnose dementia? Many of you maybe have already been through this process. There is no one test. There is no one blood test or brain scan or cognitive test to fully determine a type of dementia. It's really kind of a collection of tools that have to be used and assessed by a qualified provider. So typically there's a complete medical history, looking at family history, looking at medical history of this individual, current medications, how well do you sleep, what kind of stress is in your life, all different sorts of things. There's a physical examination, of course, looking at things like blood pressure and is there an infection present, or what physically might be happening with this person. A neurological examination, some brain imaging like an MRI or a CT scan or a PET scan, a lab draw, so typically drawing for blood and looking for different vitamin levels in the blood or different kinds of biomarkers. And there's typically a neuropsychological evaluation as well, a really in-depth cognitive test that helps look at different lobes of the brain, different cognitive functions to see what's going well, where the challenges are, and how does that help with making an accurate diagnosis. So we do want to understand the progression of the disease, and each disease may progress differently, which is why I wanted to address at least the most common forms of dementia in the beginning. Sometimes people have just that general dementia diagnosis, and it doesn't really give you a whole lot of information. It tells you something about the symptoms. You can probably gather that it's going to be a progressive type of condition, but it may not tell you much about the underlying cause, the life expectancy, the types of treatment that might be useful for each form of dementia. And so really understanding the specific type of dementia your loved one has can have a lot of benefits. But also each person is different. So you could take 2 people with Alzheimer's disease of the same age, same stage of the disease, and they may have a very different experience, different symptoms that are more pronounced, different kinds of skill sets that have been built up, different personalities, lots of changes from one person to another. Comorbidities may also play a role. So I may have Alzheimer's disease or Lewy body dementia, but I may also have uncontrolled diabetes. I might have heart disease. I might have cancer. I might have something else that may affect the progression of my dementia as well. And so it is important to learn about the type of dementia that your loved one has. Thank you for being on this webinar today. And there's a lot more places to get information about specific forms of dementia, much more in depth. So some of the benefits of early detection and diagnosis. People often ask me, well, why would I want to know? Why would I want to know that I had Alzheimer's disease if there's no cure anyway? Well, there are a lot of reasons to detect changes early on and to get an accurate diagnosis as early as possible. For one thing, it allows the person who's living with this diagnosis to be involved in decision making. In the early stage of the disease, that person usually has quite a bit of capacity to be able to talk about the future and what do I want in the future, and what are my goals, what are my values, what are my preferences, how am I going to prepare for some of the needs that might come down the road, what are some of the bucket list things that I want to do today. So it allows that person to be involved in decision making for the future. It allows for appropriate medical management. What kinds of medications might be useful to help treat symptoms, even early on in the disease process? How does knowing this information possibly change your strategy in addressing other health conditions that might arise and decisions that are being made? Having an early diagnosis allows for long-term care planning. We know that these are progressive conditions. A lot of care will be needed down the road, and each family has to decide for themselves what that looks like. But we know that there's a lot of expense involved in that, a lot of resources that need to be tapped into, a lot of information to be gathered. So it really gives more time to plan for the future. It allows for involvement in clinical trials. I really advocate for being involved in research. Not only may you be doing something that's potentially helpful to the person with the diagnosis, there's something to be said for the placebo effect too, even if you're not on a medication. It also gives you access to experts in the field, where you may have some frequent visits to neurologists and nurse practitioners who really understand the disease process and can be a great source of support for the person with the diagnosis and the family. And of course, it's being part of something larger than any one person, hopefully being part of a change in the future, and kind of changing the trajectory of these different diseases. And having that early diagnosis also allows for access to resources and development of a care team. It gives you more time to assess, what do we have, what do we need, what are we going to do, who's part of this team, who can help guide us. It really gives a lot of time to digest information and prepare, rather than waiting until there's sort of a crisis and you feel like you're backed into a corner and don't know what your options are, but feel forced to choose something, very quickly. So treatment, what are the goals of treatment? For dementia, there are some medications that may improve symptoms. For example, there are some FDA-approved medications that have been on the market for many years, more than a decade, to help with symptoms of Alzheimer's. They're not actually slowing down the disease process, but they're helping the brain compensate for these changes for a while. And there may be other medications that are helpful for other forms of dementia. Those who experience dementia often experience depression as well, and so it gives a chance to treat depression or anxiety or other kinds of changes that person may be experiencing. For the person living with the diagnosis, really the two most important things for them are to be physically and socially active. Those are the things that really help maximize functional independence. So whether they slow down the disease process or not is still to be determined, but we know that that helps functionally in getting through the day and having good quality of life, being physically active and socially active. Another form of treatment is really focused on the care partners. It's making sure that care partners are receiving guidance. They have information in terms that they can digest and understand. It's providing support for care partners. We know that these diseases don't only affect the person who is diagnosed, it's affecting that care partner as well, that primary care partner. So we need to make sure that those folks are well cared for. And again, another part of treatment is maybe to get involved in research. And at the very end of the presentation, I have a link to that clinicaltrials.gov. With this diagnosis, we have to understand that yes, there are many changes happening in the brain. Changes may be happening with memory, but there are often communication changes that are occurring as well. One of the things that we want to do for our loved ones is to allow that person enough time to respond to a comment or a question that you ask. One of the things that I'll often do is I'll make sure that I'm only asking one question at a time, and I will take a breath. I will pause between questions. I will, or after making one statement, I'll take a breath. I'll give time for that person to digest this information before I move on. So it's just kind of for those of us who are maybe the well spouse or the family member or friend, slowing ourselves down a little bit. We want to use a little bit more simple verbal commands. And again, this depends on the stage of the disease, the type of vocabulary and the pace at which you talk, and the complexity of the things you say would be different for someone in the early stage of the disease versus the later stage of the disease. If we are giving a direction, we want to make sure that we're breaking it down into small steps. You know, not can you go upstairs and grab the shoes and bring the newspaper down and turn on the coffee pot and take the garbage out to the street. You know, that's too much. It's just one thing at a time. And even thinking about something like brushing your teeth, there are a number of steps involved in that one, what we think of as one task. So really being mindful of what my loved one can do and keeping my loved one as independent as possible, but knowing I may have to change the way that I communicate. We want to use a calm, reassuring voice when we're communicating. We don't want to be demanding. We don't want to rush people. You know, we really want to make sure that our loved ones understand that we are on their team. We are on this journey together. We want to try to avoid any conflict or kind of confrontation or us versus them or you're against me. You know, we want to make sure that our communication style reflects that we are partners. We want to avoid using any harsh tones, you know, harsh tone of voice or negative words. So rather than saying, well, you can't do that anymore, maybe we can find a more positive way to say that. Well, I'd love to do that together. We don't want to offer too many choices. You know, I don't know if anyone has ever been to a restaurant where you've got like a 10-page long menu. I know even for me that can be overwhelming. Now let's think about the person living with dementia. Even having you know, kind of a number of choices for dinner might be too much. Maybe it's more effective if I offer two options. I see they have your favorite this and they have this. What do you think? Does one of those sound good to you? Or maybe it's just kind of eventually into the diagnosis, into the disease, maybe more of a yes/no question. You know, I was thinking about making burgers tonight. How do you feel about that? When we're approaching someone, we want to always identify ourselves and or others for the person who's unable to remember names. So when I go and visit my own grandmother who has vascular dementia, I always say my name. I say, you know, hi grandma, I'm so glad to see you. You know, it's Lindsay, your granddaughter. And in disclosure, she lives a long ways away. I just get to see her a couple of times a year. But I never want her to feel, you know, like her mind is spinning. You know, which grandchild is this? She looks familiar, but I can't place her. I want to let her off the hook so that we can really enjoy our time together. We want to help that person find appropriate words for self-expression. You know, sometimes it is more difficult to word find or to articulate a thought or how do I really feel about this? And so that might be something that we can help with. And we also want to use touch in a very loving way, you know, to lightly touch the person to provide reassurance. You know, to put our arms around our loved one or to, you know, extend a hand for a handshake or to hold hands. And of course, knowing what that person is comfortable with, but making sure that we are providing that nonverbal communication of love and affection and reassurance. When there's a dementia diagnosis, we need to sometimes consider environmental changes. If you are living in your home, maybe the home you've lived in for the last 30 or 40 years, it was not designed for dementia care. It was likely designed for a family. One of the things that families often need to do is start to remove some of the clutter in the home. When a person is living with dementia, it can be very distracting to see lots of different things around, and it's hard to focus on what I'm trying to do next when I'm very easily distracted by this pile of papers over here, or by, you know, having 20 pairs of shoes in my closet. Now it's hard for me to choose which one I should wear today. What if we simplified the environment? You know, what if we put away all of the things that person doesn't really need to utilize, take all the things off the kitchen counter except for maybe the coffee cup and or the cereal bowl, or the things that person really needs in the moment. What if we simplified the closet? So instead of having all 4 seasons worth of clothing, formal to informal, maybe we just put those 5 or 10 outfits that person might choose on a daily basis with just a couple of selections of shoes. We might want to start using labels or visual cues in the home. For someone in the early stage of the disease, that this person probably really wants to be helpful and might help put away the dishes from the dishwasher, for example. but may start getting confused about where things go. You may find that the coffee cups are in with the pots and pans, or that the pots and pans end up in the broom closet around the corner. So we might start using some labels on the cupboards or like on the dresser in the bedroom in the early stage of the disease. And as the disease progresses, you might start changing over to more visual cues like pictures. Maybe I put a picture of the coffee cup on the cupboard where those, where those belong. Maybe I put some kind of arrows in my house to help direct that person to the bathroom or the bedroom. Maybe I put a stop sign on the door. Maybe I make sure that the bathroom door is wide open so that when my loved one is in bed and they have to go to the bathroom, they can see, there's a line of sight straight from the bed to the toilet. So just thinking about different ways we use visual cues in the environment. We might need to change the tools or materials or equipment that's used in activities. Maybe my loved one always loved to do a lot of work with their hands, woodworking, fixing things around the house, welding, all kinds of things like that. Those things may not all be safe any longer. And we may need to change some of the way that we engage in activities. We want to find comparable activities. We want to find ways to adapt things that someone already loves, but by making sure that it's also, that it's materials that are useful, that are hopefully not unsafe. Even thinking about something like doing a puzzle. Maybe my loved one used to do 500,000-piece puzzles, still enjoys puzzles, but it has become overwhelming. Maybe I can find, a 100-piece puzzle or a 25-piece puzzle or even a 6-piece puzzle that's very adult in nature, and it still allows that person to do something that they enjoy. And we might need to modify the physical environment, maybe adding more lighting, maybe a night light in the hallway, being aware of when we have the curtains open and closed, things like that. Maybe it's changing the noise level. Maybe I turn the TV off when we have dinner so that we don't have that distraction. When there's an early diagnosis, we also need to manage some of the cognitive dysfunction that occurs. One thing that we would want to do is provide some gentle verbal cues with very specific prompts and positive reinforcement. That we're really getting to the point when we're asking someone to accomplish a task, that we're providing a lot of those visual cues and that we're providing a lot of positive reinforcement. That we're not pointing out the things that weren't done successfully or weren't done with the quality that, that previously had been in place, but we can provide positive reinforcement. Thank you so much for helping me out. I really appreciate that. I just really love seeing you. You make me feel so much better. You give the best hugs, or, thank you so much. Just finding different ways to provide that positive reinforcement when that person is probably experiencing a lack in confidence, when they may be noticing that they're not able to do all the things that they used to do, and maybe feeling kind of let down by that, feeling bad. How can we help pump that person's self-esteem back up and let them know that they're a valuable member of our family? We may need to simplify an activity or break it down into more manageable or smaller steps. So even doing something like paying the bills, maybe that person still has some ability to be part of that task, but no longer can be totally responsible for it on their own. Maybe we can't sit down and pay all of the bills for the whole month together. Maybe we need to just break it down into smaller steps, more manageable pieces, provide some assistance if needed, and maybe providing some cueing. If I hand you the check and the invoice, can you put it in the envelope and seal it and put the stamp on it, right? So finding ways that we can simplify things and still allow that person to be part of daily life in the family. We want to start creating a predictable, structured routine. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be exactly the same from one day to the next. It doesn't have to be a boring routine. It doesn't have to be, like military time, but it has to be something that's predictable, which may sound counterintuitive when you think about a person living with memory loss who's having difficulty tracking time, telling time on a clock, understanding the passage of time. But there's this kind of internal clock. There's this kind of muscle memory to knowing what comes next. So establishing somewhat of a predictable routine, waking up around the same time every day, doing that daily routine in pretty much the same order, whether it's brushing teeth and then getting dressed and then having breakfast and then doing pills, or whatever it is, something that's very similar from one day to another. What do we do during the day? Do we go for a walk? Do we go to a day center? Do we go run errands? What are the things we do, and having somewhat a predictable schedule there. Again, meals at a similar time each day, and a good kind of bedtime routine as well. We can use distraction and meaningful activities when that person is starting to lose the ability to initiate activity, to know what to do next, or who is maybe starts to become really anxious, really worried about something. There may be ways that we can use distraction, kind of shifting attention to something that's a little bit more positive, more pleasant, more reassuring, and engaging that person in meaningful activity. So not something just to fill the time, not something that would be juvenile, and not something that's totally disconnected from this person's life history and hobbies and preferences. What are things that would really be meaningful for my loved one? If I was a stay-at-home mom, maybe it is doing some things around the house that are very familiar to me and would be very meaningful. If I was somebody who always worked outside on the cars, it's an entirely different set of activities that might be successful. One of the things we want to think about when there are these cognitive changes is that we want to make sure that we're just telling people what they need to know when they need to know it. So if my son is coming to visit next month, I may not tell my loved one that today, because you may hear multiple times a day, every day between now and then, is he coming today? Where is he? When is he going to be here? It's hard for that person to understand how far away a month is. So maybe just telling that person what they need to know right as it's about to happen. Or even if my loved one maybe is going to be taking a shower this evening. It's Saturday night. We always take a bath or a shower on Saturday night. I'm not going to mention that right away in the morning. I'm going to wait until we're getting ready to do that. We're about to get up and head to the bathroom. So only telling people what they need to know when they need to know it. And then we want to address difficulties with IADLs, which means instrumental activities of daily living. These are those more independent tasks that people start to have some challenges with early on in the disease process. Things like paying bills, like driving, like grocery shopping. Those are the things where you may notice your loved ones start to struggle a little bit, or you may notice that there are safety issues or there are judgment issues that really do need to be addressed. And this can be a really difficult thing for families. This may be really the first time that you've had to kind of step in and help and kind of guide a family member, or it may feel like you're taking away someone's independence, or it may be role reversal if this is adult child now needing to help mom or dad with what to do, what they can do, what's safe to do. So these are things that you don't want to ignore. As challenging as they are to address, there are things that it's going to happen, and you're going to need to have a plan, and you're probably going to need some support. So when you do notice some of these changes occurring, please reach out to someone, whether it's me or through Fairfax County, or one of the resources that you're already connected to address some of these difficulties with these instrumental activities of daily living, even early on. Now, when a person has dementia, in the early stage, it's quite common for that person to experience depression, and also for caregivers to experience depression as well. For that person who understands the extent of their impairment is more likely to be depressed over those losses. I know that I used to be able to do this and I just can't anymore. And maybe I'm scared for the future. I'm worried about how this is affecting my partner. There are often feelings of depression. And so that's something to be addressed with the medical provider. As dementia progresses, there tends to be less self-awareness and more apathy. So it's possible that there's depression, but oftentimes into the middle and late stage of the disease, it may not be so much depression, it may be more apathy, just kind of that lack of initiative, that lack of, it's just a kind of a change. Apathy is also much more common for those who are experiencing FTD, even very early on in the disease process. Just having kind of a lack of awareness about how something you say or do affects someone else, or that we need to respond to something. Why do we need to respond? Why is this something important? That person may not really be able to gauge that. With this diagnosis, we do need to get ducks in a row. There are a number of personal, legal, and financial matters that really need to be addressed, and the earlier, the better. It kind of all starts with starting the conversation. You know, it's a scary thing for families to talk about. There are many families who, if there's a recent diagnosis, aren't sure if and when to disclose the diagnosis to other people. It may feel safer to put your head in the sand than to address things head on, but that's really doing a disservice to both you if you're the care partner, but also the person who's living with the diagnosis. So start educating yourself and your family or your friends about the disease. You know, it's not always pleasant. It's not always, you know, the way we prefer to spend our time, but it's going to help you understand what's going on, what the resources are, how to still communicate effectively and to live your best life together. You do need to decide when and how to disclose the diagnosis, and there's no easy answer for this. It really varies from one family to another. Who you tell, when you tell them, how much you tell them, but there will come a time when support is needed. So I would encourage you to start thinking about how you're going to disclose the diagnosis and start having these conversations with others. You know, other people in your lives are probably noticing the changes in your loved one too, and they may just not feel like it's their place to ask about it, but they're probably noticing. And so by helping them understand what's going on, it helps them retain that relationship. We want to use effective communication techniques even early on, of course, in the disease process. You know, maybe it's focusing more on one-on-one conversation rather than being in a big group of people. And maybe it's making sure that I write a few notes down, you know, that we have some reminders of things that are being discussed or things that need to be done. Maybe my loved one likes to talk over the phone. Maybe they don't. You know, what works for my loved one, and then trying to accommodate that. We do want to involve the person living with dementia in all aspects of planning while they still have the capacity. And we want to respect our loved ones' wishes. It doesn't mean that we will be able to honor every single one of our loved ones' preferences, but we want to make sure that we have these conversations together, that we are respecting the opinion of our loved one, their preferences. Hopefully we'll be able to accommodate many of those, but we also have to remember that this is affecting the whole family. It's affecting both partners. But we do want to include people in the conversation. Reviewing legal and financial documents is really important early on in the disease process, while that person has the most competency and capacity to make these kinds of decisions and legally to be able to sign these documents. And so even if you have drawn up documents, but it was years ago, it was in a different state, health status was different at that time, I would always suggest pulling those out and reviewing them with an elder law attorney, with a financial advisor, making sure that those documents really do say what you want them to say. And if you are a spouse, you are the well spouse, it's possible that you wrote in your power of attorney that you would like your spouse who now has this diagnosis to be your decision maker, and that may not be the best decision any longer. So you may need to update your documents as well. And even early on, we want to start thinking about what are my abilities and what are my limitations as a caregiver. I can do a lot of things, but I can't do everything. You know, where am I emotionally comfortable? What's my physical capacity to be helping another person? You know, what are the things that I feel like I can and will want to and be able to do into the future? And what are those things that just really aren't realistic? As much as I may feel like something is my responsibility, or I may, you know, emotionally want to do something, it doesn't always mean that I really can. So really being honest with yourself as what can I do and where will I need some support? And you're not alone, and no one can do this alone. It's really helpful to develop some version of a care team. That includes the person living with the diagnosis. It includes you if you're the primary caregiver. It also includes other family and friends, maybe your adult children, your close friends, maybe your neighbors. It might be healthcare providers, the primary care doctor, the neurologist, other healthcare providers who might be on that team. Maybe it's an organization or a community group or a faith-based group that's near and dear to you. Maybe it's your place of worship has some outreach services that would be helpful. There are professionals that can be part of your care team. There's a whole range of professionals who might be useful to you, from those elder law attorneys and financial advisors to dementia consultants to care managers to transportation professionals, all kinds of different services that might be useful. So start kind of determining what's out there, what do I need, what could I utilize, and really learn about these resources before they're needed. Really understand these options, you understand who's available, what kinds of services they can provide before you really get into that place where you absolutely positively need them this second. You do want to make a plan for the future. You know, what healthcare, legal, and financial decisions do I have to consider? Again, we talked about those documents. What kinds of decisions have I laid out in my documents in the past, and is that really what I want moving forward? Where are my sources of support? You know, is it my adult children, or maybe they have really busy lives of their own? Maybe they live far away. And just because someone lives far away doesn't mean that they couldn't be a good source of support. It might just be in a different way. You know, is it my neighbors? Is it my workplace? Is it my local neighbor to neighbor community or my village? You know, who's around me that might be helpful? Who are the professionals that can be helpful as well? You do want to discuss care values and the role that they'll play. You know, for the person living with the diagnosis, what are their values? What's most important to them? Is it independence? Is it safety? Is it not being a burden on family members? Is it spending as much time as possible with my family members? You know, what are those really important kind of long-held values that we need to know about? What role will they play in the future? How do they guide our plan? We want to share those preferences for care. You know, if I'm living with dementia, I may have some ideas of who I want to help me with different things in the future. You know, do I prefer to have professionals help with these tasks? Do I prefer to have family members? Do I prefer to be at home? Do I prefer to be in a community where all of these services are provided? And really starting to talk about those very early on in the disease process. And then also communicating this plan to families. I often see couples who sort of want to shield their adult children. You know, it's something we want to take care of together. Our kids have really busy lives. We don't want them to worry. But in most cases, it is one of those adult children who's sort of that backup decision maker, that backup caregiver. And for adult children, I often hear that I wish I knew what mom and dad were doing. I wish I knew what their plans were. And it's really hard to talk with them about it. So making sure that whatever the plan is for the future, that it has been well communicated to kind of all of the stakeholders, especially those family members. Now, one of the tools that you can use to help develop a plan for the future is called the SHARE program. And this is an evidence-based program from the Benjamin Rose Institute on Aging. And the goals of the SHARE program are to support both SHARE partners, the person with the diagnosis and the primary caregiver, to promote health for both partners and reduce stress, to talk about the importance of engaging in fulfilling activities now and into the future, to learn about community resources that might support those values and preferences. You know, here's what I want, now what are the resources that can help make that a reality? And it's to provide education about dementia and some of the changes that lie ahead. And so the SHARE program is something that you can always contact me at Insight Memory Care Center. It's something that we do individually with families. So you can always call on us, or at the end of the presentation, I put a link to the Benjamin Rose Institute's page. So if you are watching this webinar from somewhere else around the country, you can contact them to see if there's someone near you who's offering the SHARE program. But really great kind of curriculum, a great strategy for early stage families to talk about these kinds of changes and make some plans for the future. You also want to find support, even early on into the diagnosis. Support both for the person who's living with the dementia and also for you if you are the caregiver. There are a number of support groups in the area, lots and lots of them for caregivers. And then there's a couple in the area, including one here at Insight, for those who are living with the diagnosis, who want to talk about it with other people, with their peers who are walking the same path, who really understand the feelings that this person is experiencing. So, you know, it's really finding your peers, finding people who have been there, done that, are there right now, who really truly understand. And that's not always your family members. As much as you may love and want to support each other, it's not always the same. You do want to locate community resources that might provide different types of support to you. Definitely call your area agency on aging. So if you're in Fairfax County, your area agency on aging I have listed at the end of the presentation, but making sure that you find out what's available to support both of you. You might consult with a professional. You can come and see me at Insight for a consultation, or give me a call. There are other kinds of dementia consultants around the country as well who will help you understand some of the changes, some of the places you might need some support, and where you can get some of that support. You might consider hiring help. Oftentimes you think about hiring like a home care person to come in and provide some of that care help at home. But if your loved one is still pretty early on in this disease process, they may not be very comfortable with that, or they may not have a whole lot of kind of physical needs. They just need somebody around most of the time to make sure everything's going okay. You might also consider hiring help for those other tasks at home that kind of suck up your time and energy. So maybe it's those housekeeping types of tasks, or the repair work, or the meal prep, or the lawn care, or help with filing of taxes, or the other kinds of services that might be able to help you, if you're the caregiver, focus more of your time and energy on the things that you really want to do, instead of on the things that are just causing you more and more stress. You do want to think about safety for that person, even early on in the disease process, things like identification bracelets or necklaces, making sure that driving is safe, making sure that there's safety around the home, with maybe removing, for example, power tools, or putting different kinds of safety features on with your stove. Just thinking about lots of different safety issues that might present themselves in the future, and how you can plan for that and secure safety as much as possible. And then you do want to look for housing with supportive services. Even if your goal is to stay at home, care for your loved one at home through end of life, it's really important to understand what's out there, because sometimes unexpected things happen where you end up needing that housing with supportive services, and you really didn't know anything about it. You're maybe forced to make a decision upon discharge from a hospital, and you haven't visited these places, and you don't really understand differences in levels of care. Look at those things early on. And care for yourself. Oh my goodness, probably the most important thing with being a caregiver is you have to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, how could you possibly care for another person? Work and caregiving can be one of those big struggles. If you are, maybe you're sandwich generation, you're working, you have children at home, you're caring for parents, there are a lot of challenges there to be addressed. And so looking at, all of these factors that play into everyday life. How can I balance my work and my caregiving? How might I change my schedule at work, or change, what kinds of factors can I change in my life, or what kinds of supports can I bring in so that I can still continue to work, but also oversee in a caregiving capacity? You want to understand the financial impact of caring for another person. If you do decide to retire early or to reduce your hours at work, what kind of financial impact does that have on both of you, but including you, and potentially future care that you may need if you utilize all of your resources caring for your loved one? What's there when you might need it, a number of years down the road? You really have to advocate for yourself as a caregiver. I think doctors have gotten much better at looking at the person living with dementia and their primary care partner as a team, and kind of caring for both of them. But not everyone really thinks that way. Oftentimes we focus so much on the care of the person with the diagnosis, we forget to care for the caregiver. So sometimes you have to speak up for yourself. You need to let people know what you need. You need to let them know what's happening at home for you as well. You want to recognize your emotions. Whether you're noticing it or not, you may be experiencing grief. Anticipatory grief when that diagnosis has been made, and thinking about, gosh, this retirement is not going to be what I thought it was going to be. It may be ambiguous loss. There are these just little changes that are happening every single day. My loved one could do this last week, and now today suddenly he can't. And processing all of this this long road of grief that is organic, and it changes from day to day or moment to moment, and putting, really recognizing those emotions and not trying to just kind of shove them down and ignore them, but really process those emotions. Talk to somebody about those things, whether it's a support group, or you see a counselor, or you go to your faith leader or a best friend or someone who can help you process those emotions. You do want to take care of yourself, live a healthy lifestyle, get enough sleep, get some exercise, make sure that some of your favorite things, your favorite activities are part of the routine, that you're not entirely losing your identity to becoming a caregiver. that you are still doing the things that you need to take care of yourself, to feel like you. And look for those caregiving services and support groups that are out there. The county has a caregiver support program, of course, Insight. There are lots of different places to find different types of caregiving services, and of course, many, many support groups, everything from in-person support groups to telephone-based groups to online kind of chat groups and closed Facebook groups and lots of other options as well. So here are some of the resources that I mentioned. The Fairfax County Area Agency on Aging, here's their website and their phone number. I always encourage you, whether you're in Fairfax County or somewhere else, to contact your Area Agency on Aging. There may be resources available to you that you had no idea existed. So even if you don't quite know what to ask, just call. Start telling your story. There are trained people on the other end of the phone who can help identify some of those needs and walk you through the resources that are available to you. The National Institutes of Health have a lot of great resources online, some great emails that you can sign up to receive, these kind of email blasts about different topics, including Alzheimer's or caregiving. There's the link for clinicaltrials.gov as well. There's a link for the SHARE program by the Benjamin Rose Institute to try to find someone near you who might be offering this kind of planning program for your family. AARP has a really great guide called Prepare to Care. And if you go to their website or give them a call, you can either download an electronic copy, or you can request that they will mail you a copy, and they will send you a hard copy, and there's no charge for that. So it's a really great kind of workbook that helps you when a new diagnosis is made, thinking about caregiving in the future. There are a number of different kind of large nonprofit organizations that focus on different types of dementia. So the Alzheimer's Association, which has a local chapter, the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, the Lewy Body Dementia Association. We host one of the Lewy Body Dementia caregiver support groups here at Insight in Fairfax. The Association for FTD, Frontotemporal Degeneration, is also another group, and we have an FTD caregiver support group here at Insight as well. Some of these more specific types of support groups are a little bit tricky to find. And there are lots of other organizations as well. If your loved one has a different form of dementia, like Huntington's disease, if you do an internet search, you will find an organization that focuses on that. So do reach out to these different organizations to get information, to learn about those diseases, to learn about treatments, to access webinars and helplines and all kinds of other resources. And Insight Memory Care Center is also a resource to you, particularly if you're living here in Northern Virginia. We do have a number of different types of care that we provide, including our early stage programs, Mind and Body Workshop and Share program, which are for couples. Reconnections is for those who have an early stage diagnosis, and it's really a social program. It's a place to come together with peers, with friends, and for a lot of stimulation and kind of social supports. And we also have a dementia-specific adult day centers where there are different levels of care provided, lots of stimulating person-centered activity. And there are a number of education and support offerings as well, including classes, both here at our location and out in the community. A Caregiver at a Glance guide, which is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and here at Insight as well. And then support groups, consultations, memory screenings, memory cafes, and even a caregiver cruise. So do feel free to call or email me anytime, and I'm happy to help you access resources, whether here or afar. And now we just have a couple of minutes left. If there are any questions, Lucy, can you let us know if there are any questions that have been added in the chat box?
Yes, there are, Lindsay, and thank you very much. So we did have a question early on about, dealing with the person and an individual feeling guilty about being snappy with their parent, and just, and I think you covered a lot of suggestions for this person with what you were just saying about the caregiver support and, support groups and taking care of yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. So another question is, my hardest part of caring for mom is dealing with my brother. He lives with mom but has his own problems and only wants to deal with 50-year-old sibling rivalries. Family dynamics are often quite complicated and have made caring for mom and dad so much more difficult. what would you suggest?
Right. So there are so many more variables to caregiving than just the actual care of the loved one. There are frequently family dynamics issues that arise. Unfortunately, when there is a stressful time in a family, when hopefully we're all supporting each other and there for each other, sometimes it brings up lots of negativity and rivalries and things from the past. So what I would suggest in that case is considering working with a care manager, which is a professional who could come to the home and could help with making assessments, with making recommendations, with communicating with different family members and giving sort of an expert opinion about things. It's that person who has seen lots of other families, can make some really sound recommendations, and it doesn't have to be, my idea as the daughter or my idea as the son, and my idea is always better than your idea, or, it's kind of an impartial person who can come in and make some recommendations. And you can find care managers. If you do an internet search for Aging Life Care Association, I think it's aginglifecare.org is their website, and you can find care managers in your area.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. And I realize that it's 1 o'clock. We do have a couple of more questions. If you, Lindsay, have a few more minutes, I'd like to ask you them. And if you're on and you need to go, we are recording this, so you'll be able to hear the answers to these questions. Lindsay, can I ask you like a couple more questions?
Sure, of course.
All right. What are your suggestions to deal with aggressive behavior?
So with aggressive behavior, I would try to understand the underlying cause or the trigger. What is it that happens before this behavior occurs? Who's around? When does it happen? Where does it happen? Has there been a change in health status? Like maybe there's an infection or a new medication that's been brought on board. Is there a change in the routine? Is it a change in caregiver? Is it that I'm not communicating well as that caregiver? I maybe have unrealistic expectations, or I'm using a tone of voice that's not really appropriate, or what are kind of all these variables that are maybe triggering this change in behavior. And so a couple of places where you can digest this and talk about it. Of course, you can always give me a call, and I'm happy to just kind of do a consultation, whether over the phone or in person, to talk more in depth about this situation. You could talk with the doctor about it to determine if there's any underlying health condition or medication cause. I think going to a caregiver support group is a great place. Even though it may seem separate, well, my loved one is aggressive, how does it help me to go to a support group? But you can go and talk with other people who are going through a lot of the same things and have been there, and may be able to suggest, well, this is what I tried when this happened and it worked, or it didn't, or here's a different way that I would phrase something, or just finding lots of different ideas, and also just recognizing that you're not alone, that this is not the person doing something to you on purpose. They're not trying to upset you or manipulate you or be aggressive. It's just part of the disease. It's part of the way the brain is changing. And so finding different ways to cope as a caregiver in those situations as well.
Thank you. My father has dementia, but my mother refuses to talk about it. Hold on, it just scrolled out of me. What are your suggestions to approach a conversation?
It's hard. That's a really hard one. It may be that, if mom doesn't want to talk about it, she's scared. It's hard to admit. Denial is sort of this emotional protective mechanism that we just tend to kind of avoid or push away things that scare us in the future. I would see if there's some way that you can support mom and dad, even if maybe it's the terminology that scares mom by calling it Alzheimer's or calling it dementia. Maybe it's not using those kinds of words, but just kind of seeing where you can be helpful, and maybe not always asking your parents if they need help, but just saying, hey, I'm coming over on Saturday and I'm looking forward to hanging out with both of you, or I want to take dad out for a drive for the day, or what kinds of things can I do for you around the house, and just kind of putting yourself out there to be helpful, even if mom won't quite address it. Sometimes it's just really needing to hear things flat out. If the doctor, for example, has just kind of just beats around the bush, or just calls it, cognitive change, and doesn't really put a firm label on it, maybe she's just kind of hoping for the best until she hears otherwise. Maybe making sure that the doctor does know what's going on at home. So even if you can't go to the doctor's appointments with dad or with mom and dad, if you know who the doctor is, maybe you can call and just chat with the nurse and let them know what you see, or send in a letter saying, I don't think my mom is really addressing this, but here's what I see going on with dad, to make sure that, that kind of the whole team is on the same page. So that is a really challenging situation, but seeing how you can be helpful, even if you don't use the exact words.
And what you just said about sending in a letter, we actually had to do that with my mother, just in terms of herself, because she was, she was always denying any kind of memory loss or anything. So I did have to send, before a checkup, I sent a letter to her doctor saying, this is what her family are seeing in her, to make him aware, because I couldn't speak about it in front of her. So, and just one final question. Any suggestions to get the loved one to eat?
To get the loved one to eat, it sort of depends why the person isn't eating. Is it, so here's a number of possible reasons why someone might not be eating. It may be that they're not able to initiate that anymore. Like, let's say somebody really needs to prepare their own breakfast or something. Well, they may not remember that it's time to do that, be able to find the right things in the kitchen, sequence through it to actually put that meal together. Now, let's say the meal is on the table, my loved one's not eating. Can they coordinate that movement from the fork to the food to the mouth? Is there some kind of some problem happening there with that coordination? Is it a vision problem? Is that one of the things that happens with dementia is that the person tends to lose their peripheral vision. Their visual field is more like if you were looking through binoculars. So if I'm looking at you across the table, I may not see the food that's down in front of me. I would have to move my head down to see it, where for normal healthy brain person with good vision, I can see what's in front of me. I can peripheral see what's below me, even though I'm looking straight forward. Another potential issue is that person, even if they know the food is there, it may not connect in the brain what to do with it. So if you're sitting across the table and you start eating, they may see that and mirror you. I might try finger foods. I might try to determine, is this the type of food that's familiar to them, that they like? One of the things that tends to happen with dementia is that taste buds change. I mean, taste buds do change as we age anyway, but especially with dementia, the brain's recognition of different taste sensations changes, and people tend to really like those concentrated sweets much more than they used to. So even if your loved one used to be like a potato chips and popcorn kind of person, they may really gravitate towards those pancakes and the cookies and the ice cream and those sweet things. So I would also talk with the doctor to see, is this a side effect of a medication? Some of these medications, like some of these FDA approved medications for Alzheimer's symptoms, that can be a side effect, is that person loses their appetite. So it's really having a much wider conversation about what's going on, talking to, whether it's the doctor, to a dementia professional, to really try to sort through all of these different pieces and talk through it more in depth to try to get to a useful answer for you.
All right. Well, we'll have to end it there, and I want to say thank you, not just for doing this great informative webinar, but also for staying on longer to answer some of the questions that we had. And I will remind the participants that as you sign out, there's a brief survey. Please help us out by answering it. And also, we have more webinars to come, so please stay in touch with us. And thank you again, Lindsay.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Lucy.
All right. Bye now.